Tyler.
Hi.
It's a sleepy winter morning in Alaska, and we've got a reunion on our hands. Tell me why is a point-and-click adventure game? Wow, 3 in a row now. Have I got a niche already after 4 videos? It's made by the guys who did that Life is Strange game, Dontnod, so we know we're probably going to be in for teenish, youngish adults doing some magic and having some powers and having family secrets be unveiled. I'm not sure why Dontnod has such a specific narrative to have a whole catalogue of games on. Like, 4 out of 7 games they've made have a specific focus upon this, but whatever. If you like it and you're getting the money, do what you want to do, get them coins, I guess. This time, though, we're taking on the role of not 1, but 2 protagonists.
What? Get out of here.
Alyson, who has remained in her hometown of Delos Crossing, and Tyler, who has just left Fireweed, which is the weirdest name of a place I've ever seen be used in a video game, but then again, I live in the UK where places like Mould, Snodsbury, and Curry Mallet exist. Tyler is visiting his sister after 10 years apart, with an opening sequence that definitely sets the pace for the game.
So?
Very slow. The glacial pace, because haha, I get it, we're in Alaska, The pace the game sets out allows for a more contemplative, even relaxing kind of feel to the game. So, why are we here? What's the deal? Why are we being 2 people rather than 1? Well, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, except not really, it's the first cutscene. Tyler killed his mum when he was younger out on a dock, for what he thinks is because he cut his hair to look like a boy. Fairly major spoilers from here on out though, because we have a story of what happens when 2 people remember the past differently, and why it's kinda a really good game and also a really bad game.
Tyler,
What?
look.
Let's get this out there. Tyler is transgender, female to male. It's one of the first things I saw when I played as Tyler, as I found a cool little book about it on his desk, and some people in the reviews, didn't really enjoy how ham-fisted it was into the players' faces because it's against God or something. But I'm not against transgender people, no, sir. Well, it's because when you are transgender, it's hard to ignore your own reality for the sake of everyone else in the room, and no one, in my opinion, should take off who they are at the door just because the big man in the room doesn't like who you are. And in the game, Tyler was last seen in Delos Crossing pre-transition, so people are kind of spooked and basically don't know what to say to him when he's right in front of them. Hence, there's a bit of a clear problem here because no one is educated about what it means to be transgender, because everyone except Alyson and a select few others are all collectively shitting themselves about how to approach Tyler. You see how someone like Tyler isn't the problem, it's the people not being educated about him that's the problem? Take a look at this guy, for example. He realizes Tyler is transgender and then is like,
Ronan, huh? Ronan as in the Ronans?
Uh-huh.
So, I never knew those girls had a brother.
We didn't. Nice talk.
Yeah. Enjoy your time in town, Tyler.
general transphobia isn't fun for Tyler, so he's all guarded. That's why he gets so heated when people question him about it. I, for one, think this is one of the best parts of how the game handles its portrayal and representation of gender and LGBTQ issues. For once, the game doesn't frame transgender lives as something to be debated or thrown in for a bit of progressive tokenism, deciding to just be all, you decide the politics, I'm not the one that will decide whether certain politics are good or bad, and I hate when these choices are given to us in a game. It's not doing much other than to just do this.
I mean, let me ask the audience.
And it's just a lazy way of providing conflict for the player's own internal politics, not for the internal role-playing the player is doing. Tell Me Why, however, has it framed as the idea of being transgender as something that anyone can rightfully be, and I for one think Dontnod did the good decision of not making this a debate by positioning us with Tyler, for those who don't understand his position to comprehend their experience, rather than debate it in the first place because trans people deserve to exist.
Was she trying to figure out how to support me?
Maybe.
Which she wasn't trying. She never...
It doesn't make sense. I know. You cutting your hair was what set her off, right?
The first episode is quite Tyler-centric, focusing on assuming his dead mother is someone who didn't approve of Tyler's want to transition. It's a very real fear. LGBTQ kids can relate to this, even if your assumption, thankfully, turns out to be wrong. They want to sell off the house that their mother died in to move on, but Tyler uses this as an opportunity to reconcile with the past as they search through their old belongings. After getting into their mother's old room, they discover a pamphlet for a conversion camp and a book on raising your transgender child. This gave mixed signals, and understandably, Tyler was distraught about the idea of being sent to a conversion camp for being who he is. The reveal is impactful because of how Marianne, their mother, is set up to be someone who is a good person that simply fell to a dark place. The two consistently talk about their mother as someone who became unhinged in the last few months of her life. This part in particular was one of the best written and executed parts of the episode.
She attacked me because I cut my hair.
She was mad and she attacked you. We both saw it.
Then what is this shit?
I don't know. Tyler, come here.
She can't do this to me. Not now. When I've finally made sense of a few things.
Perhaps this is the best written part of the whole series, as I found myself as someone with the same anxieties growing up, seeing how this is something upsetting yet very real in its approach to what kids like Tyler go through. The conflict, the confusion, and the anger follow Tyler through his adult life, and it peaks here. Little golden nuggets of chef's kiss greatness like this are what generally keep me in Dontnod games. These small character moments that clearly are the result of careful direction and practice. They treat certain scenarios with care and with actual research and development into what it is like for those people who undergo those conditions. Dontnod actually went out and looked for these people, for the Tlingit people's culture where the game is set, for transgender people, and for LGBTQ people, and I am so happy that this was actually done, because if there's one thing that happens way too often in media, it's people writing these characters as a selling point, or as a misery porn fantasy they find exciting to write. And yes, Tyler is voiced by a transgender man, thank God. Don't even at me with that, but why not find a talented voice actor rather than someone who fits the identity? Because I know that crappy casting directors are not going to be cast based on talent, but rather who they think looks the part rather than who actually fits the part. Transgender people aren't going to be cropping up consistently at auditions because they're probably fighting for their own rights before even thinking about auditioning for this. These circumstances are not up for debate. Tell Me Why shines best with Tyler and his experience, even if he seems somewhat abrasive and even aggressive with his actions and words as much as I don't condone them. This and the flashbacks presented give you reason to understand why he is more territorial a person and closed off, because he's grown around so many people staring at him for not only killing his own mother, except maybe not really, I'll get into that later in the video, but also for being transgender. I don't enjoy having to talk at this length about someone's identity when it should be something taken as standard, but when it's done right in this day and age, it deserves to be acknowledged. This game, consequently, will be a bit of a timestamp for the current situation for people like Tyler in a Western audience. Hopefully in 10 years' time, we can look at this and see this kind of treatment as people as a memory of a time we've grown from.
Wait. Are you still blaming yourself for that? Don't. It was my choice.
It's just... I stole your life, Tyler.
The setting of Tell Me Why happens in Delos Crossing, A middle-of-nowhere town with fairly conservative views, as per the usual.
I believe that my life is better for having lived it by God's word.
There's very much a sleepy feeling to this chilly little place that makes me want to cuddle up near a fire and drink some milkshakes because hot drinks are gross and I will die on this horribly shit take. And bitch, this town is gorgeous. Look at the pretty mountains and the snow and the lights and Tyler. I definitely did not buy this game because of Tyler's face. And so many scenic shots of the state at its best, like this scene in episode 3. If this game was a subtle way of telling me to visit Alaska sometime, it worked, because I wish I had places like this to visit in my local area. Even with this in mind, however, I felt something nagging at me throughout the game. Because this place is sparse as hell, it makes it feel somewhat dead. Most of the characters aside from Alyson and Tyler hang out in their usual spots, and there's not a lot of exploration for something that is implied to be so vast. There is a feeling of everyone doing their own thing and having their own priorities in a sort of, the flavor text on all these random items will fill in the development of scenes we couldn't be asked to actually create, sort of sense. Without being too critical, I can't tell whether the developers and the directors of the game made this an active choice. On the one hand, I can understand the desolate atmosphere of the town because, ooh, the mum is dead and now the town is dead too, don't we make apt metaphors? Or just because this is a Dontnod game and that means hours upon hours of voice acting work, artists, coding and implementation just for the person to say in a melancholic tone,
I was really close to my Uncle William until he passed.
The game has us feel like we're walking through an old childhood village, where everyone but you remembers the things they did there, and I don't enjoy this because it just tells us in a superficial way that it's important rather than showing us what Delos Crossing means to Alyson and Tyler. Like, cool, you read a book in a place and it was a good book, but like, show me why rather than just tell me why? Yes, that's a pun. I know that this conversion camp pamphlet and the transgender book means something to Tyler because of his reaction to seeing it and the information we know about him already, not because he told me, it's important, whereas they constantly appear to otherwise just say, is it the same as when I was here? Yeah, it is. Oh, okay, it is cool that it is the same. Flavor text should accent what the town should mean to the twins, not be the base of support for the meaning itself. I get the intention for it, that it adds to their relationship as twins, but this method of characterization rarely often works unless you have decent facial animation and body language, and Tell Me Why kind of has one out of the two of those. Yeah, so the rigging for the facial animations, like most Dontnod games, is really stilted and stiff. Like, there is so little activity going on in these facial muscles that Amanda Lepore is quaking. Unfortunately, every single character suffers from the same problem. This, however, was definitely unintentional, and there is some attempt in places, but it never makes that step over to something I can actually read clearly. The body language in other news totally contrasts to this in some accidentally hilarious ways. The physicality in animation is good, but when one other aspect of the scene is entirely discordant, it just makes it feel humorous when it's supposed to be serious. Tyler fully tries to punch someone at some point, but with the facial aggression of, you are making me angry, which takes me right out of the story because I'm now distracted by programmers who don't know what expressions are outside of wiggling their eyebrows. This will be a bit of a theme because god damn it, so many aspects of this game are halfway there to their full potential, and we've not gotten to the bad parts yet. Okay, so next on my little checklist of things is Alyson. Alyson is the character you start the game with. It starts with her anticipating her brother's arrival after around 7 years apart from one another. The game then quickly switches you over to Tyler for the large part of episode 1. I think episode 1 was built for Tyler's character and it was done well, hence why I was so positive about it earlier in the video. Alyson, however, is handled less elegantly. Like Donald Trump losing the election elegantly. Alyson just gets dragged around by Tyler's wishes to unearth the past around their dead mother, and I, from what the game has informed me, understand Tyler's wishes. What isn't done well is creating the conflict between Alyson and her motivation to move on and keep the peace between her hometown and Tyler wanting to find out what happened. Alyson is almost an obstacle towards completing the goal, with her having to choose between Tyler and her father figure Eddie, who is a police officer for Delos Crossing who took her in after Marianne died. The game pits you with the decision this long into the video, and I've only just mentioned the choices you have to make. You can decide my opinion on this when I say that Alyson's choice between the two is a no-brainer. I don't care about this guy. This is the first time we meet him, and it's almost the end of episode 1, and there's been exactly zero reason for me as the player to support Eddie's point of view over Tyler's, and this is supported by how over 70% of people who are faced with this choice like me sided with Tyler, despite this being framed as a large decision to make. If we had more time to explore the relationship that Alyson and Eddie had, it'd be like, shit, okay, both of them have alright points, maybe, and then I'd be able to feel the conflict. In fact, most choices relating to Alyson are just overshadowed by Tyler. After looking through all the choices, Tyler's side of the equation worked out for him every single time in the player's majority, except for 1 or 2 choices. Rightfully, she gets pissed off at Tyler, and us, in a way, for choosing him over her constantly. But when the whole narrative hinges on what the fuck happened, what's the point of trying to steer us away from that? In fact, it'd be better if she took on more of a villain role from how she tries to distract from the plot. Actually, yeah, Alyson probably would have made a better villain than the other half of a duo of protagonists. Could you imagine seeing how different your twin is and then finding that everything you've become she can't connect with anymore? Imagine the tension between trying to keep the peace between you and her spreading loads of misinformation about you to cover her intended side of the story, while also trying to get to the bottom of what happened to your own mother. That adds stakes to the story. I always felt weird playing as Alyson, aside from times you need to get her into certain areas of the building that only she can access. Her addition to the story is so unimportant, I must say. The 3rd episode is where she is most prominent. It carries on from the argument the twins have the night before, which causes Alyson to become a bit of a wreck. After spending a whopping 15 minutes trying to find her goddamn phone that she randomly threw in the basement, there's this whole thing where she gets lunch with an officer named D. She keeps reminding the player,
Just wanted to make sure we were still on for lunch.
I gotta drag my lazy ass out to have lunch with Dee. Oh shit, I'm gonna be late for my lunch with Dee.
but then when she meets her, this is what happens.
Hey, sorry I kept you waiting.
No worries.
You'll never believe it. We caught the mailbox bandit. And guess who it was?
Let me guess. Some bored kid?
Wrong. It's a raccoon. Delos Crossing's most wanted turned out to be some trash panda stowaway.
And this is how legends begin.
Anyway, hun, I'm so sorry to bail, but I gotta run this little guy to animal control now. Probably best I take a rain check.
Oh, it's okay. Totally, I understand.
The episode builds that interaction up for about half an hour. Then Alyson has a panic attack and the game makes you play a breathing minigame, which, had I not been good at rhythm games, I would probably have left the game there myself, because this bitch finicky as fuck. Then you go and meet Sam, one of her mother's friends? Lovers? I don't know, and not in a ambiguity is a clever plot point kind of way either. The game weirdly avoids putting anything close to a proper label on their relationship. You spend another 15 minutes trying to find random objects, and I took so long that Sam cut himself probably out of boredom over an actual accidental injury. Finally, Sam talks about her mother being meaningful to him, even though that was kind of established in the first episode, by having him randomly repair the house ever since she died. The only thing of note to happen to Alyson afterwards is having the final choice be made by her in terms of what kind of memory you choose to remember the situation at the dock with, her mother being angry or her mother being sad. The game seems to lean towards the sad ending being more canonical through the evidence the game throws at you, but I ended up choosing the angry one at the last moment because I forgot this is a game where I can choose the ending, so I wanted the one that was a bit less common and probably more interesting on how the twins would remember it. What I will say about the ending though is, it's fine. There's enough things to know if you choose certain things that pan out in the end, but there's something I feel like they're still missing.
What do you mean?
Well, if those kids have a father, you really think there's a court out there that'll let you keep them?
No! You have no claim to my children! Get the hell off my property, now! If you ever come back here, I'm going to kill you!
Marianne, the woman that started all of this. What do we think of how Tell Me Why portrays her? Well, really fucking weirdly, and it's all to do with how the twins' power works. They both can remember the same situation, but with different outcomes, as we saw earlier with Alyson. Sometimes the tone is gruff.
Oh yeah? And this little visit right here? What would the law say about this, huh?
Or sometimes the tone is more emotional.
Marianne, I'm sorry.
Please just go.
Because they remember the situation differently, it's hard to understand what the actual truth is. That, I think, is the intent of the game's mechanics here, to have us choose for ourselves how we remember that moment in order to progress the story. The issue, however, lies within Marianne herself. There's a lot of evidence to suggest what kind of person she was before she died in various contradictory ways. Tessa, Marianne's friend, sees her as a bit of a leech trying to get money from whoever she could.
I couldn't let her drag you down with her. She had you stealing for God's sake. Your mother never wanted to be a part of this community. She always thought she was better than the rest of us.
Other people like Sam completely idolize her as someone who could do no wrong.
I was so down I couldn't even bring myself to get out of bed. But your mama, she has having none of that.
Tyler sees her as someone aggressive and mentally unhinged from reality.
Please, Mom. I'm sorry I cut my hair. I won't do it again.
I'm going to kill you!
And Alyson saw a desperately afraid woman who only wanted to protect her children.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
There's so little agency in Marianne's own actions without it being tainted by someone else. And it is true that you tend to remember people in different lights to others. People don't all like everybody, obviously. Take this scene in the shop, for example. The twins remember her dancing to this music in a fun, carefree manner, whereas when you ask Tessa about her, she venomously spits back into your face about how your mother was a freeloader, despite how Tessa appeared to act in the memory. Contradictory scenes like this are interesting, had it not for Alyson removing a lot of the mystery, being rather insistent about Marianne's mental state prior to the night she may or may not have tried to murder Tyler.
She was really coming apart those last few months, wasn't she?
The game, however, in its second episode, shoots itself in the foot with one piece of evidence. During one of Tyler's sequences, he searches through the police archives and records in reference to Marianne's death. And Tyler really does get all the interesting scenes in this game. I am not joking. In one of the files containing a crime report, it states that, according to both witnesses, she stated, "I'm going to kill you." Keep a hold of this in your head because the ending really doesn't make sense with this in mind. At the end, you choose between which memory you remember, with one of the statements being, "I'm not gonna hurt you." Nowhere in this game until this guy, Tom, turns up does that become an option. Tom is a fairly innocuous guy who is running for the county rep, yet here Marianne is threatening him with a gun. There is this problem though. If she has a gun, for what reason is she using it for? If she was trying to kill Tom, why was it said to Tyler? If Tyler misremembered, why on earth would it be something like, "I'm going to kill you"? There are too many janky aspects of the story to rely on in order for this ending, the ending where she wasn't trying to hurt Tyler, to make sense. Tom also has a reason to promote his side of the story, as in the game, his reason for doing this is to win his local political campaign. Alyson uses the excuse that Tom was threatened by her, despite the fact that Tom never mentions this in his own retelling of the story. Without that in place, it's hard to actually say that this happened. Tom is the story's villain, and it is indeed a bit of a last-minute twist for the story to take, and by last minute I mean 90% of the game is over and they have one meaningful interaction to tie up all the loose ends before having the ending of the game. Tom is actually their father. That is the twist. This opens up a lot of questions that the game doesn't want to talk about. Like at all. Why? Why does no one know about this at all? When did they have sex and how did they hide it? If they vaguely look similar to the twins, why is no one talking about it? And most importantly, why has no one asked Marianne about the father of her children? All of these questions we will never get the answers to outside of, oh, she was hard to get to admit to anything, gorge, we all are sad she's dead. I am sad now, so no more dialogue options for you, because an entire cast of characters refuse to communicate to each other about things. We will never know how on earth Tom is their father. Tell Me Why is a game about choosing not to remember anything at all, and these twins had to suffer for it. The game is not great. It's nothing to write home about in terms of its writing or its characterization outside of the few positives I mentioned earlier on into the video. But the potential it had was astounding. I'm relieved to see trans characters that exist without much political discussion about them. The research and care put into representing a rarely seen culture is also commendable, and the story almost had its holes covered up had it not been for pretty substantial evidence that pointed to a certain way out to finish the game. Its main downfalls are its villain and the way Alyson is treated throughout the story. Had the stakes been raised by the game, the climax would perhaps have felt more rewarding for the player overall when they finally come out of that choice on the other side. I think I will, however, stick by the fact that Alyson would have made an excellent villain through how important the role of her as a sister is to Tyler, and the way in which that relationship would twist and warp progressively as more evidence is unearthed. There are other aspects of the game I didn't cover. There's this budding romance between Tyler and Michael you can maybe choose to follow that is a bit of a side story to the whole situation. It's handled alright, again, nothing too impactful. I think the word is predictable. Had it been added or removed from the game, it would not have benefited or suffered from its removal. Which is why I friend-zoned the fuck out of Michael. Sorry dude, cool guy and all, but if I can see this story from light years away pulling you into my sights to be wooed, then I canny be arsed with that. Outside of this though, I'm just a little tired of how Dontnod has a habit of shoving a diary of a character at you through the scrawlings on their table. Yeah, it might be interesting, but if you give me a story about a dead mother, I am really not going to give a shit about your favourite ice cream flavour. Thank you once again for watching. I came across this game entirely by accident, and because the LGBTQ themes are something that resonate with me, I decided to give it a shot. And yes, I really did buy the game because Tyler had a pretty face, and no, I am not sorry for this. Join me in 2021 for the next video, as this time it'll be a little bit outside of video games, but I promise it'll be a doozy. But until then, tschüss.